a very important role that the fire engineering community has is to bridge the gap between research, academia, innovation, and practical application in buildings, and the way that we typically can safeguard that at scale. And that is the lowest common denominator being minimum compliance with prescriptive guidance.
I think, why do people think there's a conflict? Because fundamentally there is, if we are not careful about how we go about resolving what are two potentially conflictory or contradictory fundamental requirements on our built environment. It is essential that we adapt our built environment to the climate change scenarios, and built environment are going to play a very, very important role in how we adapt our society and our infrastructure to meet future requirements. But we've got to do it in such a way that we are not building in inherent risks, especially around fire safety. Because what we're going to be building in the future, the materials, the systems, the energy infrastructure we're going to be using, it's going to be quite different to what we did in the past. This fundamentally changes the risk profiles, often goes outside the knowledge of current practice. And so we need to understand these risks. We need to work through them to essentially achieve what is both what should be a low carbon but also resilient buildings, because a lot of climate change is already built in. Low carbon to ensure that we're not making climate change worse and helping the transition to net zero carbon societies and economies, but doing so in a way that we understand the risks and where the intersection of these new materials, these new systems, whether it be building services or electrical infrastructure, charging, renewable energy systems, we're building those in a way and integrating those into our built environment where we're not creating unnecessary or unacceptable levels of fire safety. The consequences of not getting that right and finding that right balance is very, very difficult, because obviously the least sustainable outcome is a fire that leads to a loss of a major asset, or worse, loss of life, which could be catastrophic for public confidence in what is an essential journey that we've got to take society on. So it's really about just things are going to be different in the future. Therefore, the risk profiles that you're used to are going to be different. So we need to reevaluate, look at what those new systems are, and there's a myriad of them, and make sure that we're looking for both building performance, but also safety and resilience at the same time. Otherwise, it will be a very difficult coming together of these competing requirements.
Yes. So it sounds like there's a lot of challenges to resolve. Eoin, as a fire engineer, how does the net zero agenda affect your daily decision making when working on a project?
Thanks for the question. Thanks for having me on. And would first start by saying I'd echo everything that Gavin has said there to set the scene. We do have a definite perceived or potential conflict between the objectives to deliver sustainable and resilient built environment versus achieving fire safety and demonstrating that in our projects. And I think as a fire safety engineer, we're seeing this very much as a challenge or a potential tension today. The most obvious manifestation of this is that to understand the risks, such as Gavin described, and to be aware of these new technologies, how they're changing risk profiles, and our real kind of fundamental fire safety science side, understanding how that might change what we need to do in our buildings to demonstrate safety, versus the way we usually do that and the way we've built up that body of approaches and practices and comfort for, let's say, more traditional or still more typical forms of construction, which is prescriptive guidance, trodden paths for compliance and testing and demonstrating performance, and awareness of what it takes to go from design through evidencing through to construction, implementation, and operation of a building. So all of that is somewhat changing in many ways, and we're seeing that as I mentioned on projects today. This isn't a future issue. And some examples would include, the changing materials we build structural frames from, and potentially lower carbon forms of construction such as mass timber, and hybrids involving timber. Reusing existing structures, either repurposing or adapting or changing the energy performance of those and what that means for fire safety. To new forms of energy generation and capture being integrated within buildings, such as photovoltaic cells, battery energy storage systems, all electric buildings, and the desire to maybe reduce combustion and combustion fuel within buildings, installation of external greening, all of this. So all of these areas are things that we're being challenged to enable within buildings today, and ultimately, as a fire engineer, I feel that's essentially our primary purpose, to enable buildings to meet a competing and wide range of goals, safely and efficiently. So we have challenges day to day on our projects. We also have challenges as an industry to find ways to respond to this potential conflict or tension efficiently at scale.
Yeah, certainly a big topic and very challenging for everyone. Gavin, did you have any further thoughts on the sort of challenge of balancing priorities on these
Yeah,
projects?
I mean, just trying to draw this sort of high-level element together. I mean, I think Eoin's very correct to point out the urgency of this. This is very much happening as we speak. And that comes with it a whole heap of challenges about speed of innovation, speed of change in how we organize ourselves to address this issue across our industry. And when I say industry, I'm very much talking about the broader construction and property sector. So it's a very big, complicated, very fragmented sector with long supply chains. But being a little more optimistic, the good news is we have the knowledge and we have the technology to do this. We have the technology to build safe, resilient, high performance buildings. The challenge is in how we organize ourselves in such a big and complicated sector, and a sector that's not well organized and doesn't have a track history of doing two critical things which are required this time round. One is to move at pace, and to be to innovate at pace. So look, it's the good news is it's doable. The challenge is how do we take such a large group of people in different roles with different knowledge and different understanding and different perspectives on the same issue on that journey. So I don't underestimate the challenge, but being optimistic and positive, we are able to do it if we apply ourselves appropriately.
Yeah, and on that note, how do you think that we as fire safety professionals can help support sustainability? Particularly when it comes to material selection practices.
A very important role that the fire engineering community has is to bridge the gap between research, academia, innovation, and practical application in buildings, and the way that we typically can safeguard that at scale. And that is the lowest common denominator being minimum compliance with prescriptive guidance, because ultimately we do not have the time, the capacity, or the bandwidth to carry out detailed project-specific solutions for all of our projects. We need to find ways to share knowledge, create feedback loops that genuinely improve the body of knowledge and available solutions to all designers that are learning from what's happening in the innovation academic space. And conversely, we need to feed through to those looking to innovate in this area and those looking to tackle the fundamental research questions. What exactly are the priority things we're trying to build? What are the things that are genuine safety concerns, and where are the actual kind of outcome-focused gaps?
Yeah, you talk about spending more time and money on research to get some nice clear rules for the sector, which certainly would be a huge improvement. Gavin, do you think that'll help improve confidence in the sector, which I think seems to be a bit low at the moment?
I think it has to. I think that, the key issue here is that everyone has to see this as part of their role, and continuing on saying, well, that thinking fire safety is someone else's problem. And I speak as someone who spent many years in the sustainability energy performance side of things. I always assumed that someone else was worrying about fire safety. That's not good enough, and it's not going to be good. It wasn't good enough then in hindsight. But knowing what we now know for all the obvious and most tragic reasons, it's essential that we all see this as our role, and that's a two-sided coin. The fire safety professional needs to see it as their role as integrating, or in Eoin said, bridging into the rest of the sector, and really sharing that knowledge that they have and those insights, and most importantly, that understanding that there are risks, and if we understand the risks, we can start to manage them. Likewise, the sustainability sector needs to, understand that the decisions they're making have an impact on other aspects of the building, and need to open up and start to open their mind to the risks that they're creating. So there's definitely around sharing knowledge, as Eoin said, and understanding each other's positions, where we can actually start to move this forward. And then we've just got to integrate it across the whole sector, so everyone understands that they have a role to play in this. Not everyone has to be an expert fire engineer. You don't need to know all of it, but you need to understand that there's a trade-off in risk here. And so hopefully people start to ask the right questions at the right times before something bad happens.
Yeah, I think sharing knowledge is certainly going to help improve sort of feedback loops, which I think sort of one of the challenges at the moment is getting the right feedback to the right people for all of the changes and suggestions that get implemented. And you spoke a bit about sort of the roles that people play and how that's changing. Eoin, do you find that your role as a fire engineer has changed, or the perception of it's changed in the industry?
Well, as I said, I've always seen my role as being an enabler, and thankfully, I've actually found in recent times it's more easy to explain to my partner, my friends, or in the pub what exactly it is I'm trying to enable. I mean, these are front page kind of common understandings now of the things we need to do to transition to a more sustainable built environment, both in terms of how we create it and use it. So the type of potential, technologies and fire safety concerns that I mentioned at the start are not things we have to clamor for airwave space on now. These are known and these are known fire safety concerns. So I guess as a consultant on our projects, there's certainly earlier questions, potentially more questions, and more expectation for us to set out the full pathway from design decisions through to evidencing. And we are obviously, as Gavin mentioned as well, responding to or dealing with a sector in transition that is rebuilding trust and confidence. And in some ways, as Gavin also mentioned, putting ourselves together and restructuring ourselves in a way that can do that. And we, as consultants, do get asked questions around, can you approve this solution, or can you say if this technology or this proposal is okay? And often we're stepping beyond typical current guidance, and we need to enter a space of judgment and a space where fire engineering and performance-based design is needed.